And then we started a series just a few weeks ago called The God Who Seeks. And excited about this one, really looking at the heart of God and what drives him, how he would view us. And I know a lot of us grew up in situations where maybe you grew up and you grew up in a church and it always felt like God was mad or distant, kind of disconnected from our lives, and it felt like we were always kind of disappointing him. Maybe some of us grew up and you're like me and you didn't really know if there was a God, or if there was a God, what he would be like, right? That was kind of my story. I didn't grow up in the church at all. And what we want to look at is the reality of how God actually is, how he shows up in the person of Jesus, and how God is actually a God who seeks us out. That he's not running away from us. He's not sick of us or ready to throw his hands up and done with us. He's actually moving towards us in relationship, and that's really the reason that Jesus came in the first place. We've been having some conversations around that. If you're just jumping in today, you can catch up if you want to. We've talked over the last few weeks about how Jesus seeks different people, kind of in different situations. We talked about how he seeks the desperate, how he seeks the traitor, how he seeks after even somebody who has done some things that are pretty ugly. And what we want to do today is we want to have a conversation around how God seeks out the common, right? Kind of the everyday person, the person that doesn't really stand out as like an exceptional person or human being. There's kind of the norm, right? The normal person, and that person, the common person, often maybe underestimates or doesn't quite know how much God cares and loves and is actually moving towards us in relationships. So we're going to look at a story today that shows how God shows up in the life of somebody who's kind of just a common everyday person. And even before we do that, even before we turn there in our Bibles, I want to set us up a little bit to look at this passage, right? Because one of the things that's tough about looking at the Bible in 2024 is we kind of know how the story plays out, right? We kind of know the rest of how the Bible shapes out, right? Even if you're kind of vaguely familiar, you know what goes on from here. And what I want us to do today is as we hear the story, as we look at the story, to hear it kind of with fresh ears and to see it with fresh eyes, because as we read the story, as it were playing out in real time, we wouldn't know how the rest of it was going to play out, right? And that's one of the beautiful things about seeing the Bible is we can kind of see what that would have felt like and been like in the moment. And that's what we're going to watch as Jesus encounters an individual in a pretty unique way. And we're going to see what that all looked like as he kind of chased down the heart of a common man. So here's the conversation. We're going to dive in here in Luke chapter 5. And so if you have a Bible, open up to Luke chapter 5. We're going to be in verses 1 through 11, kind of that range there. And so you can follow along there if you want. If you don't have a Bible and you want one, like Lily said, there's some Bibles underneath the chairs there. You can actually take that home with you. If you don't have a copy of the Bible, we'd love to give that to you as a gift today. So use it today in service. Maybe write your name in it if you want to keep it. Take it home with you. Right? You're like, am I allowed? Yes, you are allowed to do that. Feels like stealing. It's not. We gave it to you, right? So don't worry, you won't be tased on the way out. All right, it's good. Keep it. Okay, so here we are, Luke chapter 5. Here is what Luke tells us as Jesus begins to do some pretty fantastic things. Here's what he says in verse 1 of 5. It says, one day, as Jesus was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, or the Sea of Galilee is the other way that this is called, the people were crowding around him and listening to the word of God. He saw at the water's edge 2 boats left there by the fishermen who were washing their nets. Let's just pause here for a minute, explain a little bit of the background. So Jesus would have begun his teaching ministry, right? So he's beginning to teach the people. It would have actually been pretty common for teachers, if they had a large crowd, a lot of people, to do it by a lake, right? If you've ever been by a lake, the sound carries really easily over water, right? You can kind of hear what's happening all the way across the lake. So you think this is a time, there's no microphones, there's no way to amplify your voice. It's easy to communicate to lots of people when there's water around. So Jesus is doing that, right? He's got a crowd of people, they're by the lake, and he's teaching the word of God. Meanwhile, you've got some fishermen that are kind of in the wings here a little bit, and there's some boats that are by the side. The fishermen are washing their nets. And why that's important is this. Fishermen in this time, they would have been kind of your common, everyday people, right? They're just like your normal guys. Maybe it's a family business. Often that would be the case, is that sons would grow up with their dads who fished, and then they would teach them how to fish, and they would have an enormous amount of skill around fishing. They would know the waters. They would know the nets. They would have expertise, just like you have expertise in your field and understand it very deeply. They would have had the same thing. And the only reason they would be washing their nets is because they're done for the day, right? So they just imagine this thing. When you think of the Sea of Galilee, how many of you guys, anybody ever been to Israel? Any ever been? A couple people have been to Israel, right? Very few, I would imagine. When you hear Sea of Galilee, at least before I've been to Israel, before I went there, I imagined this beautiful thing with pristine water. It's just a lake, folks, okay? That's what it is. It's just a lake. It's a bigger one, okay, but it's just a lake, so don't get mystical with it. It's just a body of water. It's a lake. The water's almost black. And just like if you've ever swam in a lake, you get close to the edge of it, it's all mucky, right? And so when they would throw their nets out and they would try to get fish, they would get all that muck all over their nets, and they would every night have to wash those things because they would have to maintain their equipment just like everybody else. So that's what they're doing. Jesus is going to come up and say, hey, I need a boat, right? I want to get out into the middle of the lake, and that way he can face everybody. So he's not on the edge of the lake trying to amplify. He's looking at people, teaching to the crowds from the boat. And this is where Jesus begins to approach, who we're going to find out here in a minute, is going to be Peter, or Simon, as he's often called here early on. Right, so here's the story. Continues on. It says, Jesus got into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon, and he asked him to put out a little from shore, and then he sat down and he taught the people from the boat. Okay, so far pretty easy. Simon has given Jesus' boat. The teacher is teaching from it. It all makes sense. It's all good. Go one more step. It says, when he had finished speaking, so Jesus wrapped up his teaching, his message, he says to Simon, this is where it gets interesting, he says, put out into deep water and let down the nets for a catch. Simon answered, Master, we've worked hard all night and we haven't caught anything, but because you say so, I will let down the nets. I want us to feel this a little bit, okay? So we are, imagine you're Simon, you've done this fishing thing for a long time. You're good at it. You're frustrated because you've been up all night trying to catch fish, right? This is often what would happen is fishermen would go out and they would go deep into the night to try to catch fish. They hadn't caught anything, right? And this is hard for some of us to relate to, but these guys would basically think of them kind of working on commission. Right? You don't catch any fish, you don't eat. You don't have anything to sell. There's not an hourly wage because if you don't catch fish, you don't make money. So these guys are not only tired, they've been up all night. They just washed their net. All the equipment is away. Jesus, fine, you can use our boats. But now you want us to take our stuff back out. We're exhausted. We know there's no fish out there. We've just done this all night long. And I can't imagine a world where Peter and the other guys aren't kind of rolling their eyes a little bit, like, dude, you're a teacher, right? You're not a fisherman. You don't know what you're doing. Stay in your lane, man, right? I mean, you totally would have had that. You just imagine me coming to your work and be like, hey, I think you should do that way. You'd be like, Ryan, teach the Bible, man, right? Do what you do. You do you, I'll do me. There's no way he didn't have just a little bit of that in here, right? You hear some of it. He's like, hey, Master, we worked pretty hard all night. We haven't caught anything. But then he defers, right? He says, but because you say so, I'll let down the nets. I'm in, okay? Who knows how this felt? I would have loved to watch this interaction. It would have been amazing. But what we see happening is Jesus is moving towards Simon, as everyday, normal people, right? Just a normal guy, evidently with a hairpiece here. I'm not sure what happened there. But just a normal guy, and he says, hey, I want you to do this thing. Now, watch what happens. So fun. Peter's in. He rolls with it. He says, when they had done so, they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. So they signaled their partners in the other boat to come and help them, and they came and filled both boats so full that they began to sink. This would be something that these guys never would have experienced. Nobody ever catches this many fish at one time, right? In fact, this is probably the big moment for Peter where he is like, the thing happened that I've always really wanted to have happen, right? If I'm Peter, if I'm Simon, right, I'm going to use those names interchangeably, it's the same person. If I'm Simon and I'm a fisherman, the day that you catch a gazillion fish is like the best day ever, right? He's like you and I. All of us have this. We have this thing in our head. You have it. I'm almost sure you do. I have it. Right? Where there's at least one scenario in our heads that if this circumstance played out, if X, Y, and Z happened, then it would be absolutely amazing. It'd be like my dreams came true, or there'd be immediate relief. Right? And that can look a little different for different people. Maybe some of us, you're like, man, if I could just find a boyfriend or a girlfriend, if they just like fell out of the sky, right? That would be amazing. Oh, look, here they are. Some of you are like, if just a huge chunk of money fell from the sky, that would be amazing. Don't tell me you never thought about it, right? It is what it is. A big relief to think if this thing happened, it would immediately make my life easier, better, happier. Simon could have looked at this huge load of fish, and he could have grabbed hold of it and run with this thing, and just imagine what would have happened if he were to do that. He could have looked at this, and his business could have taken off. Just this load alone, I'm guessing, could have fed him for quite some time, and he could have made quite a bit of money off of that. There goes my lid. Ooh, no one look. Here we go. Right? He could have lived off that thing for quite a while. Not to mention the fact that everybody knows that his boat is the boat that the major teacher guy blessed. Right? That this guy made this happen, and now the story's out, and now everything can take off, and he could look and just run with this huge supernatural thing that happened. My big moment of relief came, and now all I have to do is grab hold of the opportunity to run with it. There's little doubt in my mind that didn't even cross his mind, or that there's no option of that. I would have at least been thinking that in the background, right? When a fisherman is fishing and he catches a supernatural amount of fish, feels like a thing you would want to run with. That's not what happens. Right? Very different response, and I want us to see it. It says, when Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees. And he said, "Go away from me, Lord. I'm a sinful man." For he and all his companions were astonished at the catch of fish they had taken. And so were James and John, the sons of Zebedee, Simon's partners. Everybody's blown away by this thing. Right? These guys would have recognized that what just happened wasn't just a magic trick. It wasn't a unique, party skill, party trick that some neat teacher pulled off. Whatever just happened here was different. What Peter would recognize is he would look and say, I'm not even sure if I understand what's going on here, but I know I'm not worthy of this. I'm a sinful man. I'm a normal person. Go away from me, Jesus. I'm not worthy of this. he would be blown away by it. He probably would have recognized his inadequacy for whatever was happening right here, right? The dream was fulfilled, the relief came, and rather than cling to it, he looks and he says, Jesus, go away from me, I'm a sinful man. I wonder what was going on within Peter, within Simon, in this moment. I wonder if he thought, I'm not the kind of guy that this thing happens to. I'm just a normal person. I know where I've been, and I know what I've done, and I know that I'm not worthy of being around someone like this who can do something of this magnitude. Who am I? I'm just a common nobody, a normal man. How could God use me? Guys, I don't know if you've ever felt like that or not. God knows me, and he sees me, and he sees all my inadequacies, and he sees my weakness, and he knows where I came from, he knows what I did. I remember being a little kid. I grew up in a broken home, right? A home where divorce was present. And I remember being just deeply shaken up as a little kid. Even to the point where I was fragile, a lot going on. And I was struggling in school. And even to the point where I was failing my geography class. I'll never forget, you get those interim reports. You used to get I don't know how it works now. You get physical copies of them, and I would get that thing, and I saw an F on there. And I knew, I was 10 years old. I'll never forget it. I remember thinking, how am I going to get myself out of this? How do I get myself out of the hole? How will what will I ever accomplish? Remember, I'm 10. I don't know how the rest of the story is going to play. At that moment, I remember the way my teacher looked at me, and she looked at me like a flunky, right? She looked at me with some scorn, like, don't you know how to get it together, man? And I was so fragile and so I'm like, I don't even know how to get myself to function, and what am I ever going to become? How am I going to get out of this? Where's my life going to go? How could I have ever imagined that God would take that 10-year-old kid and the way I thought of myself in that moment? And I never could have imagined that he would choose to use my life, right, in a powerful or radical way. Peter was most likely in a place where he'd already been passed over. He wasn't a scholar. He wasn't a leader. He wasn't a rabbi. He was going to do the normal thing, the common thing. And certainly he had made decisions that he wasn't proud of. He knew he was a sinful man. But this day, Jesus came to him. And he did something for him that was far more than he could ever think, ask, or imagine. Watch what happens. Then Jesus said to Simon, "Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. From now on, you will fish for people." So they pulled their boats up on shore, left everything, and followed him. Guys, this story is blowing my mind. He is sitting on his big relief. The thing that he's been waiting to have happen, it happened. Right? The big bucket of money fell from the sky. Right? His business just blew up. He just became the fisherman of Galilee, right? It all happened right there. It could have, if he wanted that to have, he could have grabbed hold of this and clung to it and rode that thing for dear life. I don't know how, but that somehow he was able to do the math to figure out, I'm not going to cling to the dream. I'm not going to cling to the relief. I'm not going to cling to the provision. I'm going to hold all this with an open hand. But what I am going to do is I'm going to look and say, I want to cling not to the dream, but to the dream giver. Not to the provision, but to the provider. I want to cling to the one who can do this supernatural thing. And he says, in fact, I'll leave all this behind for the sake of following this one. Right? And he just dumps it and walks. I mean, that is crazy. Who does that? He hit the lottery. See ya. And he walks away and he pivots and he moves his whole life trajectory. Jesus has sought him, and now he's inviting him to seek him back. Now, we have the beautiful perspective of being able to see how the rest of the story plays. Simon, when he says yes to Jesus and when he leaves all this behind, he doesn't know yet that he's going to become Peter, the guy that's like a big, big deal in the Bible, right? We think of him as a character, a Bible character, Peter, you know. He's just a dude. He's just a guy trying to feed his family, trying to catch some fish, man, and like make it through the week. He doesn't know that what Jesus is going to do in and through his life is turn him into something far more than ever anything he could have thought or asked or imagined for himself. Not for his own glory or his own fame, not for any of that, but that God might use his life in a very powerful and a profound way. He would look and say, hey, see this amazing thing, the thing that you think you want? I'm going to do something that is exponentially more than that. I'm going to make you a fisher of men. And while Peter would have stared at this huge mass of fish that were caught, and he would have remembered that, there would be a day in his future after hanging out with Jesus for a few years, and after Jesus went to the cross and rose from the dead, and now Peter's the guy that's kind of in charge of it all. And he's like, I was just this, like not that long ago. Now I'm in charge. Peter would be the guy that God would use, and he would preach, and thousands of people would accept Jesus and be baptized. This picture was a glimpse of what Jesus would do with him, in him, through him. Far more than he could ask, think, or imagine. He thought he was going to give himself to catching fish and provide. Instead, his life would be used in such a way that his name would be remembered throughout history for the fame and the glory of Christ. This is huge. The reason why we're spending time here and dialing in on this is this. When Jesus looks at you and I, no matter where we've been or what we've done, no matter how common or how deep of a failure we think we are, he's in pursuit of us. And he's looking at you and I, and he's saying, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. You can release that death grip on the thing you think you need, on the thing that you're kind of begging me to do for you. It's fine to request it. It's great. I'll take all that. But I actually have something different and more significant in mind for you. What I want you to cling to is not the relief or even the dream. Hold all that with an open hand. What I want you to do is I want you to follow me. I want you to cling to me. You follow me. And what I'll do in you is I will make you into something that is far more than you can imagine. What I've seen Jesus do is take broken, thrown away people, common, everyday, ordinary people. Even the book of Acts would say this about the disciples. These are common, ordinary men. But the religious leaders recognized that they had been with Jesus. Jesus is looking and saying, I want you to come be with me. Follow me, and I'm going to make you into something that's far more. I'm going to turn you into a person, a man, a woman, that is beyond anything that you could imagine. Peter never would have imagined himself way back here staring at the pile of fish as the guy at the forefront of the beginning of a movement that would change the entire globe. Seeing this? Why did Jesus come? We learned last week he came to seek and save the lost. He wants to do that in you and me. And if you're here today and you don't know that, or you're discovering, kind of figuring out who Jesus is, you need to hear that and know it. Jesus wants to forgive you. He's looking at you today and he's offering forgiveness. It's on the table. Listen, he doesn't want to stop there, though. He doesn't want to stop at only forgiving your sins. He actually wants to include you in the mission of making his forgiveness and his love known throughout the world. He wants to use your life in a significant way. Like Joe and Renee got to be used by God in a powerful way in Lily's life. Like so many others are being used in a power. Who knew that God could use us in such power? Who knows what God would do in and through you in 5 or 10 or 15 years from now? What if it's possible that hundreds of people are impacted by you because you, like Peter, had the courage to release your grip on the relief or the dream or the thing that you thought you needed to be okay. And you said, instead, I'm going to cling to a person. And I'm going to let him move me into the places that I'm afraid of, into challenging waters, into squaring off with the pain of my past, into discovering the truth, into learning how to follow. Simon Peter would have the highest highs and the lowest lows in the stories. He would claim Jesus and recognize that he was the Son of God and the Messiah, and he would wreck it and he would deny him 3 times. He's all over the place, and so are you and I. See, God can use anybody. And what I want you to recognize is the anybody he's seeking today is you. It's you. No, Ryan, it's right. It's you, right? Because you're on a staff, you're on a church. Nope, it's you. Does that mean I have to leave my job? Probably not. I have no idea how it'll look. But he wants to use you and change you and alter you and bring life through you. What if children are altered through you? What if God uses you to bring hope and life to many? Think about the fact that this campus would not be here unless some people said, I'll lay down my comfort and I'll be used by Jesus in a new community. That's what Grace Church does. We start new campuses. What if a group of people said, no, I will cling to my stuff. I'm only going to... And that doesn't happen, right? This doesn't exist. What if a group of people didn't say, I'm going to sacrifice financially and build a place and build a building and allow this space to be here? It doesn't exist. What if Restore wasn't built where addiction recovery is playing out in powerful ways and people are finding hope in life each and every week? Doesn't happen. See, the story of the gospel and the story of the movement of Jesus is every individual looking at this decision over and over again and saying, I'll lay me down and I will move towards Christ. I'll be willing to follow. And that happens in small micro steps by making decisions to start to serve or start to move or start to go to Discovery or whatever it is, start to go to Celebrate Recovery. I want to move towards whatever God's calling me to. And along the way, you end up in a place that you never thought God could use you in. A place that would have been terrifying so many years ago. That's what God's wanting to do. So here's the questions for us today, right? Here's the questions. Ryan, what do I do with all this? Here it is. If we could talk about this bubble right here, what is the thing that we're holding on to that if we got it, we would feel immediate relief? We'd feel like that's our dream. And maybe over the years that dream has shrunk or the relief, y'all settle for less. Here's the question around this. Are you willing to release your grip on it? All right, Lord. If you do it or if you don't, I'm in. If you provide or you don't provide, I'm in. I'm going to make a decision to release my grip on this, and I'm going to cling to you. I'm going to follow you. And the passion and the direction of my life is going to be towards the things that you've called me to be about. I'm going to chase after Jesus because he's the one chasing after me. He's the one that can do this. He can do far more than I could think, ask, or imagine. Will I make the exchange? Clinging on to the person of Christ and not just his provision. And as I do that, I got to know that what God will do in me, what he'll do through me, is far more than I could think, ask, or imagine. Are you in on that? Because it'd be easier to sit up here and say, hey, guys, what God wants to do is just make all your problems go away. That's not the case. What he's going to do is he's going to say, I want to bring help to you. I want to bring life to you. But what I care the most is about your soul. I want you to know that I see more in you and for you than you see in and for yourself. Jesus would look at Peter and he changed his name. He called him Peter, which means rock. He changed the very fabric of who Peter was. As if you would have told that 10-year-old kid that I was, that this is what I would be doing with my life. I mean, there's zero chance I would believe that. If I told you the picture of what God could do in you in 10 years from now, 15 years from now, the lives that could be impacted through your life, the kind of person you might become through Christ, that vision may be overwhelming and may be terrifying. I want you to hear Jesus' voice. I want you to hear him saying, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. You just follow me. Do the next thing that you know to do to follow me, whatever that is. If you have a decision to make to follow Jesus today, whether that's the first time and you're saying, yes, I want to follow Jesus with my life, maybe it's the decision to be baptized. Maybe it's a decision to say, I need to get serious about what I'm doing with myself in terms of where I land at church or don't. I got to figure all that out. What is your step towards clinging to Jesus today? And like Peter, can you leave it behind and choose to follow him? As the band comes up, would you wrestle this through? Its story is challenging me like crazy right now. Would you let the words of God and the story of how Jesus seeks us challenge your heart today as well? Would you pray with me? Lord, I thank you that you have chosen to use everyday, ordinary, broken people. People who have not felt like much. People who have failed greatly. And instead of running away from us, Lord, you have chosen to run towards us. God, I pray that you would put within each and every man and woman here an enormous courage to believe that. To believe that you want to use our lives in supernatural ways to bring life and hope to the people around us. God, would you give us courage to release our grip on the things we think we need and move that grip and that commitment to pursuit of you, to knowing you, to finding you, to being known as yours in this world. God, would you speak to our hearts and move in our lives even now?